Let's bring in Michael Wilbon. Pardon the interruption. Joins us now. Mike, what do you make of that? Kristen Leitner says that the attacks on Grayson Allen are not nice and it's a little unfair.
You can make all those cases, and the scenario you just painted, and you have to live with this voice today, Dan. This is all I got. I got some sort of little bug that's going on around here. But I was screaming at the TV last night in addition. So
you sound a little like Tone Loc today.
Yeah, I don't think I want Tone's portfolio resume, but no, I think it's all the above that you just painted. It's somewhat unfair. How do we know that? I don't know Grayson Allen. I've never spent any time with him. I don't know if he sort of embraces this like Leitner once did. Leitner embraced it for a while. He loved it.
Yeah.
So Leitner can get revisionist now. I'm not paying that any attention. And so is there a little truth, a little fiction? Sure. I think it's one of the probably most overplayed stories of the college basketball season, to tell you the truth.
The other big story today, RG3 going to Cleveland, and we were wondering collectively, the franchise that's gotten the most attention for the least amount of wins.
Cleveland Browns, baby.
Is it the Browns or the Cubs?
Well, the Cubs over a longer period of time, because the Browns have had times where they were really good and on the cusp of something.
Yeah.
But the Browns, I mean, the dysfunction and to be paying attention. I mean, it's the NFL media. It's all media because all media is NFL media. But I say when I go into PTI offices sometimes, I'm not talking out of school because I say it on the air, the amount of days that we talk about the Cleveland Browns is preposterous. I go in, I say, really? The Cleveland Browns? I don't care. There are people in town now, Dan, here in Washington, suggesting that Browns, Redskins, Monday Night Football. I'm like, shut up. Do you think people in St. Louis care about either one of those stories, or L.A., or Seattle, or Florida? No one could possibly care about a former Redskin who hasn't played in 4 years, essentially, and the Cleveland Browns. It's just a non-story that because it's the NFL, people will talk about it because they're looking for anything NFL to talk about. And again, we're guilty of this. My show's guilty of it. Every show on every network that talks about sports is guilty of talking about the Cleveland Browns too much because any damn day you talk about them at all is too much.
Well, you had Johnny Manziel there, so all you do is replace him. You bring in another Heisman Trophy winner from Texas.
Yeah.
Granted, there's drama or a little bit of baggage, but it's different drama, different baggage. And I am curious if RG3 can play. The Browns aren't any good. I'm also curious if they draft Carson Wentz. So the Browns will have a whole lot of attention come draft time.
Dan, you're curious about this with an Ohio background. if you didn't have your Ohio roots, you wouldn't be. I'm not curious about any of that.
You're not curious that RG3 can play at all?
A little bit, professionally curious.
And that they would take Carson Wentz?
I know him, and no, I don't care if they draft Wentz. No, not at all. But when they put him out there, and if we find out he can play after a camp or after a couple of games, then I'll care. It's the Cleveland Browns. Why would I be curious about the Cleveland Browns? They do this every year. How many quarterbacks? You just talked about this yesterday. 25?
Yeah.
Since 1999? Why should I care that they add a 26th quarterback to that list? And again, I care personally because it's RG3. I know him. I like him. I hope it works for him. I hope he can salvage something of a career and put it back together again. But no. I don't care about the Cleveland Browns. And I know the head coach personally. And I hope it works for him.
Darn.
I really do. But no, in the bigger context of things I get the chance to care about in sports, the Cleveland Browns have to be like 543rd.
And I had 5 more Browns questions to ask you. Okay. The Michael Sam story. Was there any part of this that interested you and Mr. Tony?
No, not yesterday. And Dan, I don't have a smoking gun. I was always more dubious about the Michael Sam story in the NFL and whether people were going to embrace him and accept him. I never believed it would happen. I don't believe in it. I believe there are too many locker rooms, particularly in the culture of the NFL, where the Southern Christian influence is enormous, and we know what that means and the implications that it carries in terms of issues revolving around, gay participation in all fronts in America, and the opposition often, not all the time, often to it. I look at this in a more sinister way than I think most people do. I think the NFL still wants no part of Michael Sam.
But do you think that they instructed the Rams to draft him with one of their?
No, I'm skeptical of that.
But you don't want him to go
skeptical.
undrafted, Mike, because then your league is labeled there. And I'm thinking all about
Wait,
PR.
You sound really as skeptical as me now. You sound like you think this is sinister too, in a way, if you believe that.
I think lightly sinister that the NFL instructed the Rams to take a guy who went to the University of Missouri. You have
Right.
Jeff Fisher, who's been there a long time, and they probably thought, let's make sure he gets drafted, because it's going to look bad if we have the co-defensive player of the year out of the SEC not getting drafted at all. And that's why I think that
you build a persuasive case, Dan. And again, I think the NFL, I don't believe at all in the NFL or any of its platitudes when it comes to this story, or when it came to this story 2 years ago or however long ago it was. So I'm much more likely to have jumped on that scenario early. I was trying to give them perhaps a little bit of a benefit of the doubt, if you will. You're very persuasive in building the case that way. Whatever it is, I guess one reason I turned off is because I just whatever the sinister case that can be built is, I tend to seize it and believe it when it comes to the notion that an openly gay man is going to be immediately accepted in every NFL locker room. I've talked to too many players, on background or completely off the record to believe that at this point still. And that's sad. That's a sad statement to make, but I still think that's where we are largely.
Well, a former player told me yesterday when he saw that we had a tweet from Michael Sam, and I said, how does this really play out? And he said, if Michael Sam never went public, never outed himself, teams would not have a problem with this, because you're going to get questions now about Michael Sam being in the locker room, and players don't want that, but they're fine because there are gay teammates. Let's face it.
Yeah. I think it's much more I agree. It's much more likely to be at some point accepted that way. But if we think there wouldn't be ignorant utterances at the finding out that an already existing teammate is gay, I think we'd be naive in that instance as well. But I think that's a much more likely scenario, much more acceptable, if you will, for people who still oppose it and would oppose him. But I didn't. No, we didn't do the story yesterday, and I think in large part because there were other stories to do yesterday, and on a slower day we might have delved into it. But I am so dubious about it that I have to sort of dial down my own skepticism before dealing with any part of that story again.
Before I let you go, we have to ask, it's required by the FDA, about LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Mike, did you watch them at all against the Nets last night?
Yes, I did.
I mean, I'm watching going, wait, are the Cavaliers any good? Do they care? And the body language? And I'm going,
Dan, but you know how basically they were in a funk anyway. Yeah. I mean, I spent some time with the Cavaliers a couple of weeks ago, and I had been saying I thought they were in a funk for a month. Okay, look, you've been around a lot of pro basketball in your life and a lot of locker rooms. You know that in the NBA season you can get into a funk, you can get yourself out of it in plenty of time for the playoffs. You can get back in one. I knew the Cavaliers were in one. Guys didn't even really deny that. But what's happening now, if they're not careful, is much deeper than that. And because basically I think LeBron looks at his team and thinks, I need to go to the whip hand here. And I need to ride this horse a lot harder. Well, maybe the personnel on that team won't go for it. I don't know how this is working because I haven't been around him this week. But, Dan, this is a big thing. I had a couple of players say to me, do not pencil in the Cleveland Cavaliers in the finals just yet, even though they're the best team. We all know they're the best team in the East. But the way things are going right now, they got about 10 days to get themselves straightened out. I don't think anybody at the bottom of the bracket in the NBA playoffs will be able to challenge them. But if they resent LeBron James going in, look, Michael, Magic, Larry, all these guys have Kobe, They have had to browbeat their teammates at some point, and their teammates didn't like it, but they didn't resent the star going into the playoffs. And if that is the case, I'm not suggesting it is, but if that winds up being the case in 2 weeks, the Cavaliers are in trouble because they're not so much better than everybody else anymore like they were last year, that they're going to get just a free pass, that they have to beat Boston or they have to beat Miami or they have to beat Charlotte. And I know those teams aren't as good as Cleveland. But, Dan, I'm like you. I'm watching them last night going, wow, this is now a month-long funk. Who gets them out of it? Can LeBron get them out? Can T. Lue get them out? Can the owner come down and have a pep talk? Who pulls them out of this spiral? And I don't know the answer.
Thank you for risking your voice to come on here.
I'm just rehearsing for screaming at Tony later.
I know, but I expect Tony to sound like the old guy yelling. I know. You've been yelling a whole lot on PTI, Mike.
I have been. I've had people, including my own family members, say, what are you, an 80-year-old man yelling at kids every day?
Like you got personal with Tony the other day when you likened him to, like when Tony went all in on LeBron James.
He got in his head. What was that about?
I don't know. That was deep. What Tony says
He
said he's the most unhappy man in the world, and the grass is always
Tony,
green.
That's you. That was Tony projecting.
Yes, Tony's the most unhappy man.
Yes, we've known him long enough to know that and be able to say it. Yes.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, buddy. Michael Wilbon. Wilbon.